There are monsters in this world that wear human faces, and gentlemen who hide behind masks of horror. On Willow Street, we learned the difference too late. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm about to tell you how an entire neighborhood destroyed the kindest soul we'd ever known, all because we trusted our eyes more than our hearts. By the time we understood what we'd done, the real monster had already won. This is the story of Marcus Webb, the man we called a monster, and the truth that haunted us long after he was gone. The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, when the maple trees along Willow Street were just beginning to turn gold. I was watering my petunias when I first saw him step out of the cab, a massive figure, easily 6'5", with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. But it was his face that made me drop my watering can. The entire left side of Marcus Webb's face was a landscape of scar tissue, twisted and purple, pulling his eye downward and his mouth into a permanent half-grimace. Burns, I would later learn. The kind that spoke of fire and unimaginable pain. His hands, too, were scarred, the fingers on his left hand gnarled and stiff. I wasn't the only one staring. By noon, every curtain on Willow Street was twitching. By evening, the phone tree was buzzing with speculation. "Did you see him?" Margaret Pritchard from number 42 called me before dinner. "That man moving into the old Henderson place? Sarah, he looks dangerous. Those scars, what kind of person has scars like that?" "We don't know anything about him, Margaret," I said, though my own unease sat heavy in my stomach. "Exactly," she replied. "We don't know anything. He could be anyone. A criminal, someone violent. Why else would someone like that move to a quiet street like ours?" I hung up feeling dirty, but I didn't defend him. How could I? I didn't know him either. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as Marcus Webb carried boxes into his house with surprising gentleness, despite his size. Each box was handled with care, set down slowly, deliberately. When a stack of books tumbled from a torn cardboard bottom, he knelt down, a process that seemed to cause him pain, and picked up each volume individually, brushing off invisible dust before carrying them inside. It was my daughter Emma who first broke the invisible barrier we'd all erected. Emma was 7, with her father's fearlessness and my curiosity. She was playing with her soccer ball in the front yard when it rolled across the street, coming to rest against Marcus Webb's mailbox. Before I could call out to her, she'd already crossed the street. I ran to the door, my heart hammering. Marcus had been checking his mail. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, and I saw Emma freeze, her eyes going wide. He froze too, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then Emma smiled.
"Hi, I'm Emma. That's my ball. Can I get it?"
I watched Marcus's good eye widen with something like shock. His damaged mouth worked, trying to form words. When they came, his voice was unexpectedly soft, cultured even. "Of course. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be in your way." He stepped back, giving her space, and Emma grabbed her ball. But instead of running back, she tilted her head, studying him with that brutal honesty only children possess. "What happened to your face?" she asked. "Emma," I called out, finally finding my voice, hurrying across the street. "I'm so sorry, she doesn't understand." Marcus held up his gnarled hand, stopping me. He knelt down slowly to Emma's level, wincing slightly. "It's all right. It's a fair question." He looked at my daughter with surprising kindness. "There was a fire, a long time ago. I was hurt, but I survived. These scars are just reminders that I'm still here." Emma nodded seriously. "My mom says scars show you've been strong, that they're like medals." I felt my face flush. I'd told her that after she'd scraped her knee badly last summer, Marcus's damaged face tried to smile, and the attempt was both heartbreaking and beautiful. "Your mom sounds very wise." "She is," Emma agreed. "Do you like soccer?" "I'm practicing to be on a team. I used to play," Marcus said quietly. "A lifetime ago." "Maybe you could practice with me sometime," Emma said brightly. And before I could intervene, she'd already run back to our yard, calling out, "Bye, Mr. Scary Face." I wanted to disappear into the ground. "Mr. Webb, I am so incredibly sorry." But Marcus was laughing. Actually laughing, a rusty sound like it hadn't been used in years. "It's honest. I prefer it to the stairs." He stood up slowly, his expression growing distant. Mrs. Chen, Sarah Chen. Mrs. Chen, please don't apologize for your daughter. She's the first person in 3 days to actually speak to me like I'm human. The sadness in his voice cut through me. I know how I look. I know what people think when they see me. I'm used to it. The resignation in those words haunted me for the rest of the day. That evening I called Margaret back. We should organize a welcome to the neighborhood, I said. For him? Her voice rose an octave. Sarah, are you serious after you saw him up close? Especially after I saw him up close. He's just a man, Margaret. A man who's been through something terrible. Or caused something terrible, she countered. We have children on this street, Sarah. We have a responsibility to keep them safe. Safe from what? A man who was kind to my daughter? But Margaret had already made up her mind. And I knew she wasn't alone. The neighborhood watch meeting that week had an agenda item that made my stomach turn. Discussion of new resident at 156 Willow Street. I didn't attend. I told myself I was too busy. The truth was I was a coward. The weeks that followed revealed a pattern that shamed me more each day. Marcus Webb kept to himself, venturing out only for necessities. He walked to the small grocery store 3 blocks away every Thursday, always in the early morning when the streets were emptiest. He kept his head down, his damaged face turned away from passers-by. But I started to notice other things too. The garden at 156 began to transform. Marcus worked in it every day, his movements slow but purposeful. Despite his gnarled hands, he coaxed beauty from the earth, roses, tulips, intricate herb gardens. He built a small fountain from river stones, the gentle bubble of water audible from the street. When Mrs. Patterson's cat went missing, it was Marcus who found it, trapped in a storm drain. He spent 2 hours on his saint, Omok in the mud, speaking softly to the terrified animal, until he could gently pull it free. He returned it to Mrs. Patterson's doorstep in a cardboard box lined with a soft towel, then left before she could answer the door. I only knew it was him because I'd been watching from my window, ashamed by my own curiosity. Emma talked about him constantly. Mr. Webb waved at me today, she'd say, or Mr. Webb's garden is so pretty. Can we plant roses like that? You shouldn't bother him, honey, I'd say, though the words felt like betrayal. I'm not bothering him. He smiles when he sees me. Well, kind of. His face doesn't work right, but his eyes smile. Children see what we refuse to. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was late October, the evening before Halloween. I was helping Emma with her princess costume when I heard the shouting. I looked out the window to see a group of teenagers on the sidewalk in front of Marcus's house. Even from a distance I could hear the cruelty in their laughter. Hey, Frankenstein, one of them yelled. Happy Halloween. You don't even need a costume. Marcus was visible in his doorway, frozen, his hand on the door as if debating whether to close it or step outside. Did you escape from the circus? Another teen jeered. Or is your face just naturally that fucked up? I saw Marcus's shoulders slump, saw him begin to close the door. Then one of the kids threw something. An egg, I think. It splattered across Marcus's chest, yolk and shell dripping down his shirt. The teens erupted in laughter. And Marcus just stood there taking it, his face expressionless. I should have run out there. I should have called the police. I should have done something. Instead, I pulled Emma away from the window and turned up the TV, drowning out the sounds from outside. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I didn't want to get involved, that Marcus was a grown man who could handle himself. All lies I told myself to excuse my cowardice. The next morning, I found Emma crying on the front porch. What's wrong, baby? She pointed across the street. During the night, someone had spray-painted Marcus's fence. The words made me feel sick. Monster. Freak. Get out. And Marcus was outside, already scrubbing at the paint with chemicals and a brush, his movements methodical, resigned. This was not, I realized, the first time he'd had to do this. Why are people so mean to Mr. Webb? Emma sobbed. He's nice, he feeds the birds, he grows beautiful flowers. Why do they call him a monster? I had no answer that didn't indict myself. That afternoon, while Emma was at a playdate, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went to the public library and asked the librarian if she could help me find information about Marcus Webb. She was hesitant at first, but I lied. Told her I was organizing a neighborhood welcome and wanted to know more about our new neighbor. She showed me how to search old newspaper archives. What I found broke my heart. 10 years ago, in a town 3 states away, Marcus Webb had been an elementary school teacher. By all accounts, beloved. There were pictures of him from before, a handsome man with kind eyes and an easy smile surrounded by children at a school picnic. Then came the article that explained everything. There had been a fire at the school, an electrical fault in the old building. Marcus's classroom had been on the 2nd floor. He'd been teaching 4th grade that day, 23 students in his care. The fire spread fast, cutting off the main stairwell. According to witnesses, Marcus could have escaped through the window. Instead, he'd gone the other way, back into the smoke and flames, leading the children to an alternate exit. He'd gotten every single child out safely, but while doing a final sweep to make sure no one was left behind, part of the ceiling had collapsed. By the time firefighters pulled him out, the damage was done. The article included a quote from one of the parents. "Marcus Webb is a hero. He saved my daughter's life. I don't care what he looks like now, I see an angel." But there were other articles too, later ones, about how Marcus had struggled to return to teaching, how children seeing his face had screamed, how parents had complained, saying his appearance was frightening, that he was traumatizing their kids, how he'd eventually resigned, unable to bear the rejection from the very age group he'd sacrificed everything to save. I sat in the library parking lot and cried. That evening, I knocked on Marcus Webb's door. He answered cautiously, surprise evident in his expression. "Mr. Webb," I said, my voice shaking, "I owe you an apology. A massive apology." He looked confused. "For what?" "For being part of the problem, for staying silent, for not defending you to my neighbors, for not stopping those kids last night, for," I took a breath, "for judging you by your appearance instead of your actions." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "You looked me up." It wasn't a question. "I did, and I'm ashamed it took me this long. You're a hero, Mr. Webb. Those children, you saved them all." His damaged face twisted with emotion. "I couldn't save my face, couldn't save my career, couldn't save the life I had." His voice cracked. "Some hero. You saved 23 children," I said firmly. 23 kids went home to their families that night because of you. That's everything. And now I can't even walk down the street without people crossing to the other side," he said, and the despair in his voice was crushing. "I thought maybe here, in a new place, it might be different. But monsters are monsters, no matter where they go." "You're not a monster," I said. "The people who judge you without knowing you, we're the monsters. And I'm going to do everything I can to make this right." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Chen, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I've been living with this face for 10 years. I know how this story goes. Please, don't make things harder by trying to change minds that don't want to be changed. I'll keep to myself. I won't cause any trouble. I just want to be left alone." The defeat in his words kept me awake all night. The truth revealed, I couldn't leave it alone. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a woman possessed. I printed out the newspaper articles about the fire and Marcus's heroism. I made copies and hand-delivered them to every house on Willow Street with a personal note explaining what our monster had actually done. The responses were mixed. Some people, like the Johnsons at number 38, were genuinely moved. Mrs. Johnson came to my door in tears. "I can't believe we've been so cruel." That poor man. What he must have endured. Others, like Margaret Pritchard, were unmoved. "That was 10 years ago, Sarah. People change. Trauma changes people. How do we know what he's capable of now? And frankly, hero or not, his appearance is disturbing. We have to think about the children." "Emma isn't disturbed," I countered. "Emma sees him as a person. Emma is 7 and doesn't understand danger," Margaret shot back. But the worst response came from Daniel Morrison, president of the Neighborhood Watch, a real estate agent who'd lived on Willow Street for 20 years. "Look, Sarah," he said, leaning against his BMW. "I appreciate the sentiment. What happened to him is tragic. But tragic doesn't mean good for property values. People want to live in beautiful neighborhoods with beautiful homes and beautiful people. That's reality. Webb's presence is already affecting the perception of this street. I've had 3 potential buyers cite concerns about that scarred man after viewing properties. This is business. This is a human being's life, I said, disgusted. And this is my livelihood, he replied coolly. I'm not the villain here, Sarah. I'm being realistic. I wanted to scream. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his quiet existence. His garden grew more beautiful with each passing day. He added a small bench beneath a willow tree, and I often saw him sitting there in the evenings, reading. He seemed to favor classic literature. I spotted him with everything from Dickens to Dostoevsky. Emma, bless her persistent heart, hadn't given up on her friendship. She'd leave drawings in his mailbox, childish sketches of flowers and rainbows, with to Mr. Webb's scrawl, D across the top. Sometimes I'd see him looking at them through his window, holding them gently, like they were made of glass. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. It was early November, unseasonably warm. I was inside making lunch when I heard Emma scream. I'd never moved so fast in my life. I burst through the front door to see Emma in the street, her bike lying on its side. And standing over her, reaching down with his scarred hands, was Marcus Webb. For one terrible second, 1 second, I will regret for the rest of my life. I thought the worst. Get away from her, I screamed, running toward them. Marcus jerked back as if I'd struck him, his hands raised in surrender. And that's when I saw Emma's leg, saw the blood streaming from her knee, saw the tears on her face. Mommy, I fell, she sobbed. I was going too fast and I hit a rock and Mr. Webb was helping me. I skidded to a stop, horror and shame washing over me in equal measure. Marcus was backing away, his expression devastated. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I heard her cry out. I only wanted to help. I didn't touch her. I swear I didn't touch her. The fact that he felt he had to say that broke something inside me. Mr. Webb, wait. I started, but he was already walking away, his shoulders hunched, his head down. I gathered Emma into my arms and she cried against my shoulder. Why did you yell at him, Mommy? He was being nice. He was going to get you. He said I shouldn't move in case I hurt myself more and he was going to get you. I know, baby, I know. Mommy made a mistake. A terrible, revealing mistake. Later that evening, after I'd bandaged Emma's knee and put her to bed, I sat on my porch, wrestling with my conscience. Across the street, Marcus's house was dark except for a single light in what I assumed was his bedroom. I thought about what it must be like to be him, to have saved 23 lives and lost your own in the process, to have given everything and received only fear and hatred in return, to be so thoroughly judged by your appearance that a simple act of kindness, helping an injured child, could be mistaken for something sinister. How did he bear it? I was still sitting there when headlights turned onto our street. A car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of Marcus's house. A woman got out, young, maybe mid-20s, with a small child, a boy no more than 3 or 4 on her hip. She walked up to Marcus's door and knocked. The porch light came on. Marcus appeared in the doorway, and even from across the street I could see his shock. The woman said something I couldn't hear, and Marcus stepped back, shaking his head, his hands raised in that same gesture of surrender I'd seen earlier. But the woman persisted. She was crying now. I could see her shoulders shaking. The little boy reached out his arms toward Marcus, and Marcus, slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe it was real, took the child into his scarred arms. All 3 of them were crying now. The woman was talking rapidly, gesturing, and Marcus was nodding, tears streaming down the damaged side of his face. I watched them disappear inside the house. The next morning, Emma and I were in the front yard when the woman and her son emerged from Marcus's house. She saw me watching and, to my surprise, walked over. Hi, she said, smiling. I'm Jessica Eves. That's my son, Tyler. Sarah Chen. This is Emma. Mr. Webb told me what happened yesterday. Jessica said, her expression turning serious. With Emma's accident. He said you were frightened, that you thought, well. He said he understood why. I'm not proud of my reaction, I admitted. Jessica looked back at Marcus's house, where Tyler was visible in the window, waving to a figure inside. That man saved my life, she said quietly. I was one of his students. I was 9 years old when the fire happened. I was trapped, paralyzed with fear, choking on smoke. Mr. Webb found me hiding under my desk. He carried me out on his back. She touched her throat. I have scars, too, from the smoke inhalation. Not visible like his, but they're there. I've spent the last 10 years trying to find him, to thank him, to tell him that I became a teacher because of him. That I'm alive, that my son exists because of what he did that day. Her voice broke, but I couldn't find him. He'd moved, changed his number. I think he was trying to disappear. Then last month someone recognized his picture in one of my Facebook posts. I was doing a thank a teacher thing and I used an old photo. They told me he'd moved here. Does he know you were looking for him? I asked. He does now. And you know what he said? Jessica wiped her eyes. He apologized for his face, for being frightening, for not being the teacher I remembered. Can you imagine? The man who saved my life apologized to me for being scarred. Emma, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. His scars are like medals. That's what my mom says. Jessica smiled through her tears. Your mom is absolutely right. That afternoon, Jessica asked if she could organize a gathering. A small thing, she said, just some of Marcus's former students who wanted to thank him. I helped her spread the word. What we thought would be a small thing turned into something much bigger. On the designated Saturday they came, 23 adults, many with children of their own, descending on Willow Street. Each one of them had been in Marcus Webb's classroom that day. Each one of them owed their life to him. They brought photos, pictures of Marcus from before, surrounded by smiling children, pictures of graduations, weddings, births, all the life events they'd experienced because Marcus had saved them. They brought stories. Mr. Webb taught me that kindness matters more than anything, said one woman, now a doctor. He showed me what real courage looks like, said a man who'd become a firefighter. He made me believe I could do anything, said another. A teacher like Jessica. The entire neighborhood came out to watch. I saw Margaret Pritchard standing on her lawn, her hand over her mouth. Saw Daniel Morrison looking uncomfortable. Saw the teenagers who'd thrown eggs hanging back at the edge of the crowd, looking ashamed. And Marcus, standing in the center of it all, surrounded by the children he'd saved, now adults, now parents themselves, seemed unable to speak. He could only stand there, tears streaming down his ruined face, as person after person hugged him, thanked him, told him what his sacrifice had meant. Tyler, Jessica's son, pushed through the crowd and grabbed Marcus's scarred hand. Mommy says you're a hero, he announced loudly. Are you a hero? Marcus knelt down slowly, his damage face level with the boys. No, he said softly. I'm just someone who did what anyone would do. But you got hurt, Tyler said, touching Marcus's scars with the fearless curiosity of a child. Does it hurt now? Sometimes, Marcus admitted. But seeing all of you here, knowing you're safe and happy, that makes everything worth it. Shh, you're my hero, Tyler declared, and threw his small arms around Marcus's neck. I wasn't the only one crying. That evening, after everyone had left, I found Marcus sitting on his bench beneath the willow tree. I approached slowly, giving him space. May I join you? He gestured to the empty seat beside him. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle burble of his fountain. Thank you, he finally said, for what you did, for bringing Jessica's message to me, for organizing all of this. I didn't organize it, I said. Jessica did. I just helped. And it's the least I could do after how I've treated you. You've been kinder than most, Marcus said. That's a low bar, I replied. Marcus, I need to tell you something. That day with Emma, when I screamed at you, that wasn't about you. It was about my fear, my prejudice, my failure to see past your scars to the person beneath. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part is? He finally said. It's not the stares, it's not the insults, it's the loneliness. For 10 years I've been alone. People see this face and they see a monster, and I started to believe them. I started to think maybe I was a monster, that maybe I deserved to be alone. You're not a monster, I said firmly. You never were. Then why does the world treat me like one? I had no good answer for that. Because people are afraid of what they don't understand. Because we judge books by their covers and faces by their scars. Because it's easier to reject than to accept, easier to fear than to love. I paused. But today, you saw the truth. 23 lives, Marcus. 23 people who are alive because of you. How many of us can say we've made that kind of difference? It doesn't change how I look, he said quietly. No, I agreed. But maybe it can change how we see. How we choose to see. From that day forward, Willow Street began to change. Slowly at first, then more rapidly. Mrs. Johnson started bringing Marcus baked goods every Sunday. The Johnsons' teenage son, previously one of the kids who'd harassed him, came over to apologize and ask if Marcus needed help with yard work. Soon he was coming by every weekend, learning about gardening from Marcus, having conversations about literature and life. Emma became a regular visitor, and I often came home to find her in Marcus's garden, helping him plant bulbs or listening to him read aloud. He had a beautiful reading voice, cultured and gentle, and he brought stories to life in a way that captivated her. Even Margaret Pritchard eventually came around, though she'd never admit she was wrong. She started with a stiff apology and ended up becoming one of Marcus's most vocal defenders. "He's our neighbor," I heard her tell someone, "and we protect our own." Daniel Morrison was the last holdout, but after a frank conversation about humanity versus property values, a conversation where I may have threatened to expose his callousness to every realtor in the county, he backed off. Willow Street didn't become perfect. There were still stares from strangers, still occasional cruelty from those who didn't know Marcus's story. But now he had a community that stood with him. When those teenagers came back one evening, spray paint in hand, they found themselves facing half the neighborhood who'd heard them coming and come out to stand on Marcus's lawn. "This man is a hero," Mr. Johnson said firmly. "And if you have a problem with him, you have a problem with all of us." The kids left without saying a word. But perhaps the most profound change was in Marcus himself. He started accepting dinner invitations. He came to block parties. He began to smile more, a real smile, not the careful half-grimace he'd worn like armor. He started to believe, I think, that he might be more than his scars. One evening in late spring, nearly a year after he'd moved to Willow Street, I found him in his garden with Emma. She was chattering about her day while Marcus carefully tied up a climbing rose. "Mr. Webb," Emma said suddenly, "why do people call you a gentleman?" Marcus looked surprised. "Do they?" "I heard Mrs. Pritchard say it. She said Marcus Webb is a perfect gentleman." "What does that mean?" Marcus smiled, that beautiful, broken smile. "I think it means someone who tries to be kind, someone who treats people with respect, someone who does the right thing even when it's hard. Then you're definitely a gentleman," Emma declared. "The best gentleman on Willow Street." Watching them together, I thought about the title people had given this story. They called him a gentleman, or the monster of Willow Street. The truth was, there had been a monster on Willow Street. But it wasn't Marcus Webb. The real monster was the fear that had lived in our hearts, the prejudice that had poisoned our thoughts, the cruelty we'd shown to someone who'd already suffered more than any person should have to suffer. Marcus Webb was never a monster. He was always a gentleman. It just took us far too long to see it. Years later, when Emma was preparing to leave for college, she asked me about that time. "Mom, do you remember when Mr. Webb first moved here? When people were so mean to him?" "I do," I said, the shame still fresh even after all that time. "What changed?" she asked. "How did we go from being afraid of him to loving him?" I thought about it for a long moment. "We learned to see with our hearts instead of our eyes," I said finally. "We learned that the truest measure of a person isn't what they look like, but what they do, how they treat others, the love they give, even when they receive none in return." "Mr. Webb taught us that," Emma said. "Yes," I agreed, "he did. Just by being himself, just by refusing to let our cruelty make him cruel, by choosing kindness when he had every reason to choose bitterness." Emma smiled. "He's coming to my graduation, you know. He said he wouldn't miss it for the world." "Of course he is," I said, my heart full. That's what family does. And that's what we'd become, all of us on Willow Street. A family. Not perfect, not without our flaws and failures, but a family nonetheless. Bound together by the lesson a scarred man had taught us about the transformative power of choosing to see the good in others, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. Marcus Webb had saved 23 children from a fire. But in the end, he saved us too. From the ugliness of our own prejudice, from the comfort of our own cruelty, from the easy path of judging rather than understanding. They called him a gentleman. They called him a monster. In truth, he was simply a man who showed us what we could become if we chose courage over fear, kindness over cruelty, and love over loneliness. And that, I think, is the most heroic thing of all. The greatest monsters are the ones we create in our own minds. The greatest heroes are the ones who show us we were wrong.